Ruler School is brought to you by Odyssey Games, where you can go to get singles for all your Force of Will and other trading card games, as well as these amazing patrons. Thank you for your support. Enjoy the video.
Hey there, Rulers. DMO73 here, bringing you the feature match for the week, and today we are playing Conqueror Format. These are two decks that were brought to us by Mike Rance for Conqueror. He is kind of the one kind of taking charge of it right now, and so we've been getting some requests for it, and so we're going to go ahead and show you this showdown between two decks. So on the left, we have Paul Reissmann, who is playing a glorious deck that is a kind of early game combo deck that Mike calls Pregnant OTK, which is trying to use the Pregnant Woman from Vingolf 2 to deal lethal in one turn. And on the right, you have Time Spinning Witch Tron, which is making use of the fact that Time Spinning Witch produces a lot of Void Will and everything else with the usual kind of Time Spinning Witch ramp package. And the Tron stones to be able to kind of get yourself to a flashy finisher quickly, a flashy high will finisher quickly, while also kind of controlling your opponent's positions. So we're going to go ahead and dig right in, see how this goes, and see what goes, and see which one comes out on top. So Glorious coming down on the first part over here. First turn, we see that Heart Stirring Sage, big piece of the combo here. It lets the Pregnant Lady go from being a 0-10 to being a 10-10. Ryuma Sakamoto coming down on the Time Spinning Witch side, an excellent first card. We can comfortably play this because we're not worried about Wall of Wind here with it being Heart Stirring Sage. So we're going to go ahead and use Time Spinning Witch's Producing of Time to be able to play for the dive effect, because it is an activate ability. So we can start looking at that hand and seeing what we're going to need. Now with Ryuma Sakamoto, we essentially get to turn Time Spinning Witch's 1 will of time per turn into a free color will of anything to be used on anything, because we can filter it through Ryuma, and that's kind of the advantage there. And it gets to be a little bit crazy when you get the Tron stones, so then suddenly you have like 7 land that 7 will that can be filtered into any color you need. Down comes Pregnant Lady, so we're already getting a little bit closer there on the combo for Paul, realizing we need to kind of set up for something pretty quick on the Time Spinning Witch side, ultimately choosing here to, I think this is a little bit of a misplay. I should have used the Time Spinning Witch will on through the Ryoma to make this only have to cost me 1 stone, but I can play the Makoto here, and we're going to go ahead and stop the final battle from being castable. The final battles would be really devastating for him to be able to, especially as the lockdown continues to go with the different Kusanagis. Final battle, if I couldn't stop it by itself, would just be able to wipe them all out for 1,000 will, or for 1,000 life. So now we have Pregnant Lady sitting there being a 10-10 because of Heart Stirring Sage. See in the hand we got a Sacred Kaimu. Blue Leaf. He has to cast the Blue Leaf, though, if it was going to be able to deal with the Ryuma or the Major at this point. So if I had used the Time Spinning Witch to play the Major, then I would be sitting on 1 stone plus Time Spinning Witch, so 2 will on Paul's turn, which would be a much better position based on what's in my hand. I think the reason why is because I just didn't have anything instant speed in my hand that I was going to need to cast for 2, so I didn't really think about it. Ultimately, though, that would have been the more efficient play line here. So we have Moonshade Stones. We can cast kind of whatever we want. We can use Glorious to discard a inheritance card to draw a card. Paul looking at that Sacred Kaimu, thinking maybe this is the time to filter it away just to see to draw into a better option, especially knowing that he has the final battle locked out here. Does decide to use a Separation of Fates on the Kusanagi, which will turn off her abilities for the turn, which means now he can cast Final Battle. He's going to then cycle through to draw a card using the inheritance of White Leaf, and then he's going to pay 200 life here for black, and then paying another 1,000 life here, doing some math here to do -5 to my board. So this is going to get rid of both of them, takes him down to 28, and this is what I'm talking about. So we're trying to lock him out of that card to keep ourselves in an advantageous position. Ultimately, he was able to play his way through it, and that's what we saw. And so now he can comfortably swing through, hit that 10 damage with the Pregnant Woman. If he had the ability to pump her up or use Resuscitating Wheel, he could swing again. This would be a position where if he did have the ability to pump her up with Sacred Kaimu, because if Glory is being flipped, then he would, you know, be able to probably kill me right there. We're going to go ahead and use the dive during his turn to be able to get a major back to my hand. We want to be able to set up for the major again. We can't hit the inheritance cards because the inheritance cards aren't going to be able, they aren't casted or cast. There we see we have Tron stones, so now we have access to 7 colorless. So if we have another Ryuma Sakamoto, suddenly we're in a much better position here to be able to stay ahead of things. Going to spend 2, play Class G's Tank. This is an wonderful card, one of the best utility regalia that ever got printed. Following it up with, we have a major coming down here. This major, I believe, is going to call Resuscitating Will. This would be to make sure it's either calling Resuscitating Will or Blue Leaf. I think the justification there is we don't want the mother to be able to swing multiple times. Kind of thinking through my potential lines there. So Blue Leaf that I know that he has in his hand, it would be to protect the major from stopping her from being bounced, but we do have access to Tank to be able to give her barrier or make her untargetable. We also have access to Lorite in hand to be able to stop that. So that's a little bit less concerning. So I think what we did call was in fact Blue Leaf, just to kind of weasel that out a little bit and make it so that we can maybe more comfortably use Tank to possibly tap down the pregnant lady before she can go to combat or anything else like that, so that we don't have to worry about taking multiple swings. Paul deciding to do Judgment here. So we'll get to ramp a stone. Now he has access to that Sacred Kaimu, being able to be a free inheritance. Swinging in with the pregnant lady, I say I'll take the 10. That's no big deal. I know he has the Kaimu in hand, so he's going to go ahead and pump it up. And so we'll take down another 10, because I've already declared no blocks. So we go down to 10 life total. We know he has at least 1 Resuscitating Will in hand, but at this point in time we feel pretty comfortable, at least especially being able to tap down the Faria if need be. Making use of Tank here in the upkeep to be able to draw a card, and then using Time Spinning Witch to use the major to look at that hand. We see there are 3 Resuscitating Wills in that hand and a Heartstring Sage. So at this point in time, we know the Blue Leaf has been kind of the Blue Leaf has already been kind of ditched to draw him into something else. But at this time, if we can play the Kusanagi, now we can lock out the Resuscitating Will, and now we're in a much better position because there's no spot removal. We have access to barrier, and we're leaving Paul with just a Heartstring Sage in his hand, which when he already has 1 on field is kind of irrelevant. He doesn't really need 2 of them. Producing 2 more here. Gonna go ahead and play a statue. This lets us draw a card, and is another way for us to turn our Time Spinning Witch Will into another color, which is very, very helpful. We do have to stare down 2 different 1,000 blocker or 1,000 attackers at this point in time, so it's a little bit tricky. We also have to deal with the fact that we have Time Spinning Witch, we have Faria's God Art, which gives her the ability to get barrier. So the timing of like when to try to tap stuff down or anything else, we have to be a little bit more specific and careful there. So as we move into the recovery, but before we go into main phase, we're going to go ahead and use Time Spinning Witch and one of our stones to produce 4, to try to use Tank to try to tap down the Faria. This is in an attempt to kind of try to force him to either use the Glorious God Art now, because we have the Lorite access to it, which is fine, or just let it happen, in which case he doesn't get a stone and we get to get further ahead. So he swings with the 1,000. We're going to go ahead and throw the Makoto that is stopping him from being able to use Blue Leaf under the wall bus. We know there's no Blue Leaf at this point. At least we're pretty sure there's no Blue Leaf at this point. So we're not terribly concerned. Before the recovery, we're going to go ahead and dive the Aramaki into Gusa, thanks to our Tron stones, so that we can force him to banish a Resonator. Gets rid of the Heart Stirring Sage, not before he pumps her up to being a 10/10. Not that we really care. We're not going to attack her this turn. We're really just trying to get to a position where we're stopping Paul from being able to win the game, and then we can close it out. We're going to go ahead and cast the Aramaki from the RFG, getting to draw ourselves a couple of cards. You see we have that Schrodinger's Observation. That's really good. The final battles will eventually be good, you know, with how much will we're going to be able to play, but ultimately we got to be a little bit cautious. We have to get to 10 will on top of the X, and we don't really want to spend any more life than we have to at this point. So we have plenty of blockers. We have ways to give ourselves barrier. We have ways to tap down. At this point in time, we're going to go ahead and throw out a the Motoko's Buddy and a Purin. So the point being here is we want a 10/10 that can answer the Faria, actually like turn it into a potential trade or answer the Pregnant Lady if he gets another Heartstring Stage out, and then Purin is just a free ramp. So we're just trying to, like I said before, we're trying to get to a point where we kind of stall out the gameplay to a point where we have so much will that we can kind of one-shot him with one of the big spells, such as the Schrodinger's Observation that you see we have in the hand. Resuscitating Will, currently tapped, locked out. One unknown in hand. Trying to figure out exactly what the play line here is to do before recovery. Paul decides to go to recovery. We go into that same kind of play lineup after he recovers, but before he moves into main phase, we're going to try to use Purin and the Stone and Tank to try to tap down his Faria. He says, okay, I'll let that happen, which is great for us because it means essentially at this point with no Heartstring Sage on the field, it means we are at least safe for a turn. It also cuts him off from a stone. We have the Heartstring Sage come back to reset the combo here, but we're feeling pretty confident that at this point we're going to be able to push past it. Passing the turn there. So with Purin, with the Tron Stones, we're sitting on upwards of 14 or 15 will, especially with Time Spinning Witch being able to filter into at least, we can filter into at least one color. This does, however, stop us from being able to cast Schrodinger's Observation. It does, however, stop us from being able to cast Farrer's Command because we don't have access to multiple colors per turn, but Ryuma Sakamoto helps that a lot here. So in quickly kind of to track things here, we know we have Paul at 2,800 life. We're looking at exactly how much will we have available here. We haven't used Time Spinning Witch. We have Purin, so that's 2. And then how much spare extra will we have on top of that. So we have Purin, Time Spinning Witch going into Black-White through Ryuma. And then we have 10 going through the stones to cast Schrodinger's Observation, the mode to target him, the player, to deal 300 damage to him times X, which would be 3,000. The one card in his hand, though, is his Seal of Wind and Light, and he's got the moon to be able to awaken it. This is going to hurt him too, so he'll go down to 26, but ultimately he does cancel that. We don't have any single way to stop it. We're not too concerned about it because we do have the Farrer's Command for the backup for next turn, and we have the bodies to be able to block the Faria, block the Pregnant Lady without really being concerned, even outside of being able to keep the Resuscitating Will safe. So we just want to keep that situation where it is. Heart Stirring Stage, making her the 10/10 for the turn. Either one has to connect here. We see him pay 200. This takes him down to 24. We play a blue leaf, so this is going to be able to banish to try to bounce the Motoko that has access to stopping him from casting those resuscitating wills. At that point in time, we're going to produce 2 will. We're going to use one of it to go into Ryuma to produce green to play a Lorite to try to stop that. He's going to flash in a Lorite to stop our Lorite. And then in response to that, we're going to use Time Spinning Witch and the other floating. So at this point in time, we know the 3 cards in his hand are Resuscitating Will. The other floating and 1 from Purin. The one from Time Spinning Witch and the other floating from our stone to be able to give Motoko barrier. So she doesn't get bounced. The Faria swings in. We throw... because he doesn't have his Prisia stone recovered, we're going to say, hey, wait, that's a 10/10 trade. Let's do that and get that off the board as a threat. And then we'll throw Aramaki underneath the pregnant lady to stop that. And at this point in time, he has cards in his hand that he can't cast. And we have more than enough will to be able to cast Pharaoh's Command, which will give all of our units +10/+10 and Pierce. So, but it also recovers them, so there's no real reason to not at least start swinging, because nothing on his side of the board as it stands right now, if I swing at his face, can kill anything that I'm going to be swinging with. So first we go into Motoko for 6, and then Ryuma for another 4. Which he blocks per... Lorite gets blocked by Lorite. And then down comes the Pharaoh's Command to give... recovers all my Resonators, gives them all +10/+10, and then Pierce. And so with that, we push on to the next game. So game 2 here, Paul choosing to go first, Paul choosing to go second, having access to that Energize. Against the Tron deck, I'm not entirely sure if that's effective. I think part of the reason is he wants to be able to stop me from landing turn 1 Ryuma, because that's pretty devastating. Because if he can't answer the turn 1 Ryuma, then I'm essentially playing 3 will worth of cards on my first turn, because Ryuma lets me use Time Spinning Witch's will to then play a 1-drop, which can be very, very debilitating very quick. Down comes the Purin on turn 1. There could be a Wall of Wind that I have to worry about there, but I'm like, you know what? If he has it, I burn the Energized. If not, then I get to play a Mana Dork. This also makes it much more comfortable to be able to play the Ryuma on turn 2, so that I have a will up to be able to use for Wall of Wind if he happens to have it. We're going to use the Time Spinning Witch will through Ryuma to then play another Purin. So again, we're getting really, really ramp heavy. Then we use the other Purin to play a Angel Statue here. Statue of Magic, which can pay 1 of any color, or 1 void to filter it into any other color by banishing it, and then I draw a card if I banish it. So this is another way to use Time Spinning Witch to help filter your deck, help ramp up everything else, just as a backup in case you don't see a Ryuma. So at this point in time, not seeing Tron Stones, but I'm sitting at a grand total of 6 will on my turn 3, which is still very, very good. I feel comfortable here to be able to swing with the Ryuma just to even get that little bit of poke damage in, taking him down to 36, because he's not going to block with a Sacred Elf, and Heart Stirring Stage isn't going to do anything if it just blocks. Time Spinning Witch and 1 stone to play the Angel Statue. This draws us a card on enter. Again, we're trying to filter into that, and we want just backup strategies just in case something happens to the Ryuma. And then we have a tank, which we're going to try to play, but Paul's going to say no to that. He's going to go ahead and I only have access to Purin at this point, so I could have had a Wall of Wind, but he had the will for it anyway, so chose the Seal of Wind and Light to get the Class G's tank off the board. He knew that put him in a very, very tough spot last game, especially since he's had kind of a slower start this time, so it's a little bit better for him to do this here. Now, so he's using Heart Stirring Sage here to try to make Sacred Elf a 3/3. in response to that, we're going to go ahead and do the Aramaki and Tagusa dive to force him to sacrifice a Resonator, to force him to get rid of the Heartstirring Sage. So it gets one of the combo pieces off the board, or he has to give up a Mana Dork pre-recovery, which puts him into a much worse position as he goes into this wall of will that he's dealing with. Elvish Priest comes down here. Really, at this point, kind of just trying to keep up with the will production that's coming down from my side of the board. See, we do have a Lorite, we have a Seal of Wind and Light, we have a Sacred Kaimu, but still missing out on those other combo pieces right now, especially having lost the Heartstring Sage. This point in time, we do have access to, that's our third type of stone, so now we're going to start being able to cast things for very, very cheap, producing a lot of will and already having the Ryuma on board to be able to filter it into any color we need. Now we just kind of start drawing cards. So we're going to try to play the Aramaki and Tagusa for 3. He's going to choose to cancel that. We're totally fine with that. You know, gets to cancel out of his hand, and we only had to spend 1 stone technically to do it. We're going to use Time Spinning Witch through the Stone of Magic Stone, or sorry, Statue of Magic, Idol of Magic, to be able to draw a card here while also producing will. Going to dive, forcing him to sacrifice a Resonator, so we get, again, keep that ramp kind of to a minimum. He's already used the Elvish Priest, so we choose to sacrifice that one. Use the floating as blue to be able to do Distortion of Time. And then recast the Aramaki and Tagusa that we just dove. So we get to play that anyway, drawing 2 additional cards and putting another body on board. This is kind of one of the things that we've talked about before with how, even in the New Frontiers meta with Tron, if you're playing like a heavy cancel deck, the value of being able to cast these dive Resonators for very cheap, being able to continually refill your hands, draw card after card after card, even if you're canceling stuff, is what allows those Tron decks to really keep up with these heavy cancel decks. We've just been in a meta in New Frontiers where the decks are kind of doing something else in addition to playing cancels, as opposed to like a heavy actual cancel package. We're going to go ahead and just hard cast another one, at which point in time he burns himself for 2 just to get in a Lorite, just to say, okay, stop drawing cards. You can put a body on board, but that's fine. I don't want to deal with that anymore. We'll go ahead and use the Ryuma to swing into his Sacred Elf. He says, no, I'm going to go ahead and block that. Gets another body off board, and we say, okay, that's fine. You can do that, no big deal. We've got blockers for days, and you don't have access to swiftness as far as we know. Fari is going to come out here just at least to put a big old threat on the board. Gives him access to a stone. He still has access to Energize. He does have the ability to pump up her as well for that free inheritance. Before recovery, we're going to go ahead and use Time Spinning Witch here to look at his hand, just to see if we might be walking into another cancel. We see there's the Sacred Kaimu, we see the Lorite, so at that point in time, we feel very, very comfortable with what we're about to do. He doesn't have any draw power there. We hit another stone. And at this point, we have two will into white and black. And then another 12 off of the stones to do an X of 12 for 3,600 damage with the Schrodinger's observation to his face. We know he doesn't have a cancel in hand. There's no draw power. We don't care about Faria's barrier. It doesn't give him the player barrier. So it's just going to go ahead and go through. Paul's like, oh, I'll flash an Orion in response just for the fun, and that will be the game. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. It was fun to take a look at all these very old cards. It's definitely been a long time since we've seen a lot of them. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you're interested in the deck list, we will be posting them up later this week. If seeing this kind of Conqueror content is something that you want to see more frequently, please let us know in the comment section down below, and I'll let Mike Rance know so we can whip up some more decks to play on the channel, or we'll goof around with it. But as anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed it, and until next time, this is TMO73 saying class dismissed.